네, 그럼 지금부터 고단한 함성과 함께 오직 페이콘 2018 LA에서만 볼 수 있는 테마파크 페이콘 월드로 떠나볼게요.
I just know that there are some great fucking trains here in Bangor!
Life is a queer when we are young. We paint with the colors of the sun. Time to live, eyes and our brains to repaint. We're shades of
Oh man, that noise means it's episode 95. You see what I did there? That's a pretty good joke. Episode 95. When is 95, anybody?
Hey, shut up! Shut the fuck up! You fucking retard!
Well, geez, I'm just trying to come up with memes here, pal. No need to get hostile. But anyways, this is episode 95 of Radio Free Innsmouth, and it's going to be about one of my favorite newer thrash metal bands, Vektor, who you heard in that intro there. Only I put funny noises under it because I'm pretty fucking silly. So Vektor started maybe like 2002 or something. They didn't put an album out for like 10 years. But during those 10 years, and probably even in David DeSanto, the main songwriter's childhood, they were all about older, very weirdo progressive thrash stuff like Voivod. So Voivod's probably famous now to more normal type people as a band that Jason Newsted was in for a while, but that was way in the early 2000s. This is from back in the 80s, back when it was new and fresh, and this is the kind of stuff that influenced Vektor. So you get these very dissonant, strange guitar chords for thrash metal and metal in general, heavily influenced by Die Kreuzen and Chrome, a couple of punk bands, and in fact there's a lot of punk influence. Also very Killing Joke-esque tribal drumming in the intro there, but now we're into straight up D-beat shit. And these kind of swoopy chords were big influence on Vektor. And that kind of just very sharp edge to the weird chords that Piggy's using for the riffs. Another band that influenced Vektor quite a bit, I would imagine, was also influenced by Voivod. They were also French Canadians, and that would be Oblivion, who brought a bit more of a technical edge to the very punk-influenced dissonant guitar theatrics of Voivod, and utilized a lot of cool clean guitar sections. Oblivion with an E, E-O-N at the end. They were also big on these mathematically precise palm-muted riffs, kind of interlocking together, and the vocal style was quite a bit more extreme than Voivod's, to the point where they're sort of in between being like a weird progressive thrash metal band and a weird progressive death metal band. They also have these odd searching leads kind of winding around their compositions. Other stuff that might have influenced Vektor quite a bit.
언제쯤 데뷔할 수 있을까라는 생각은 당연히 많이 했고.
What do you mean this section's going on too long? Everybody knows it's real important to smash that early life button, and we're trying to learn a little bit about the roots of Vektor here, if that's okay with you.
이번에 처음으로 우리 트와이스 멤버들 다 같이 여행 온 거.
Oh, don't be like that. We only have one sample left anyways. So in addition to the two major influences on Vektor's sound, being Voivod and Oblivion, we also have just a smattering of nasty, assorted, technical thrash and death metal bands that were active, but perhaps flew under people's radar, like Death Row. This is their third album, Deception Ignored, where they got really technical in how they wove together some lead guitar parts, like that right there. When we hear some Vektor later, this is a total Vektor riff. So I gotta think Deception Ignored was a major influence on Vektor, in addition to Coroner, of course. And like, probably Ospid from Russia. Just all of the old classic technical thrash metal bands of the late 80s and early 90s. Sort of a lost art today, although Vektor kind of had a little mini renaissance of it going on. Particularly on that first album, came out of nowhere in 2012. Nobody knew who these guys were, and it was amazing. So to that formula from bands you just heard, they added extreme metal techniques like blast beats and such, and also some very nasty vocals courtesy of David. And a bit of that more retro thrash feel where they accentuate the palm mutes a little bit more than was ever common in the 80s, perhaps, outside of bands like SOD. So you get these really wicked thrash breaks with those nasty, very black metal vocals. But it's still progressive. It's got that weird little harmonic thing he does at the end there. The songs are generally long. I want to say there's a 13-minute long song at the end of this album, which comes right after like a 12-minute long song. But they can do shorter ones too. And then that breakdown kind of gets turned into this very odd voivod type thing. You can see how they're really good at just dicing up riffs and bringing them back in like newer configurations to move the song along. If we were talking about a very Apollonian music, Vektor is top tier for that kind of stuff. This is their second album from 2011. It's called Outer Isolation. This song is called Dying World. You can see them doing some cool incorporation of leads with those nasty staircase thrash metal riffs. And just those really cool like bendy riffs where his fingers move all over the guitar. Also, I said this one's 2011. Their debut album was actually 2009, not 2012. Sorry. Got a little bit of a mix-up in my brain there. I bought both of these when they came out. I actually remember eagerly awaiting for this one to come out. This sounds almost like a Metallica riff, but just made more technical and progressive. There's probably quite a bit of Metallica and Vektor too, but specifically songs like Orion and Call of Cthulhu, where they utilize a lot of different guitar effects, and the songs are a bit more long and involved than the standard verse-chorus progressions of a lot of thrash metal. So this song obviously is about environmental damage being done to the earth, but it's a bit more apocalyptic and more personal in terms of the dying world, the spiritual sense, as well as the physical one, compared to stuff like Practice What You Preach and Global Warming from Testament. Other lyrical topics include the song Fast-Paced Society. Has an interesting lyrical line, no time to rebel in a fast-paced society, so maybe sort of like an insect war thing where they're talking about internet-era alienation and that kind of stuff. And these very frantic and spasmodic sorts of riffs help bring that feeling home for people. But on their third album, they got even more into trying to build something out of the ashes of society by making it a big fancy concept album, which actually has a pretty similar theme to Oxy Plagatz's third album, The Sidereal Journey. Terminal Redux being the Vektor album. It's about sort of like a race leaving a dying planet, searching for a new one, and lots of bad stuff happens to them. The drumming here is considerably more acrobatic than anything you would have heard in old technical thrash metal outside of maybe like Dark Angel. There's also a substantial black metal influence. This little melodic figure here will become important later, so make sure you remember it. That kind of melody there. They come back to it at various points throughout the track, sort of like they're leaving the atmosphere. This is a pretty hostile and but also hopeful form of it, like the spaceship's leaving whatever dying world that they are jettisoning themselves from. Then later on, as they burn through the atmosphere and get into hostile territories of space, that motif takes on a much harsher and more Voivod-esque dissonant hue. So check that out. That same kind of melody is back, but it's considerably nastier sounding, and then they're playing this almost Frost from 1349 style drum beat under it. Very interesting compositional choice. Gives everything a very macro cosmic edge. I can't get over how nasty this guy's vocals were. Like right there, Jesus. We're bringing in some more major chord voicings before it goes into this sort of Gustav Holst type thing. Definitely think that the whole Planet suite was a major influence on this album, and when we finally recover that melody, as we've hopefully reached some new, nicer planet, better than the shithole they've left behind, it takes on an even more hopeful tone. There's that same melody again, but now it's very colorful and optimistic. It's still mysterious because we are plumbing the depths of space under a bed of weird dissonant voivod chords, of course. This part coming up was very controversial. These kind of clean vocals they used on this album hadn't really been a feature of their sound before. I didn't like it initially. I like them a lot now, especially after seeing them do it live. These wordless choirs. A lot of people that I actually got into Vektor because I wouldn't shut up about this band while they were active sort of fell off the wagon after this point in the song, but I think it's pretty cool, kind of Devin Townsend-esque. I like the contrast between that and his very shrieky, desperate-sounding vocals. And that's probably the happiest riff I've ever heard played over a blast beat. So very good stuff. Unfortunately, David DeSanto, they moved the band from Arizona to Philadelphia, and I think that move, despite perhaps being a good business decision, took its toll on the interpersonal relationships within the band, and he fired basically everybody, or they quit or something, and then he was involved in a domestic dispute that I think went a little something like this.
And I took the butcher knife and put it up to her neck. I said, if you want to live to see tomorrow, you better start frying them eggs a little bit better than what you're frying. I'm tired of eating sloppy, slimy eggs.
And now the entire status of Vektor as a musical venture is in doubt, and they haven't really released anything since 2016. No, I promise it's going to be fine, because there were some other bands that were influenced by Vektor or were roughly contemporaneous with them that managed to pick up the torch quite nicely, such as Blackfast. These guys toured with Vektor and were probably influenced by them quite a bit through that experience. They're a bit more on the extreme metal end of the spectrum, a little bit less thrashy. Parts of it remind me of, in addition to the very black metal parts like this, there's parts that sound like Sound of Perseverance era Death. Might just be the vocals, but I think the technicality has something to do with that. This song's called The Oncoming Swarm. It's from their second album. It's probably my favorite song they've done. Let's do it at the gym a lot. They're really good in this build-up here, bringing just a very epic feeling to the track as they go from that clean guitar thing to those bar chords and then into these more palm-muted riffs. Makes it feel like an oncoming swarm. Not to be confused with Oncoming Storm. That was an Unearthed album. This riff here sounds quite a bit like Vektor. That lead, I mean, rather. And then we're back into this cool bar chord thing they got going on. I don't really see these guys mentioned too much. I brought them up on a podcast I guested on, Metal Up Your Fash. Or actually somebody else brought them up and I was like, oh, they're fucking dope, dude. And now we're into some very thrashy stuff indeed. That combination of a fast double bass and these really fast palm-muted riffs just does it for me, you know. I like it a lot. So check out Blackfast if you get the chance. Another band that influenced by Vektor and sort of, they're almost like the modern day Vektor now that Vektor isn't doing much anymore. Droid from Canada. You can hear that Oblivion influence in their clean guitar parts. They're not as extreme and black metal-y as Vektor is. They're a bit more in the thrash realm. Also very good bass playing. This is off of Terrestrial Mutations, their first and to date only album, I think. It only came out 2 years ago, so this is still very new thrash type stuff. Wow, there's a weird swoopy chord. So that's what I mean when they're a little bit more thrashy than Vektor. The vocals are exceptionally 80s sounding. And they do a very good job with it. Like I said, they're basically the Vektor that we have now that Vektor isn't doing anything. Even their logos look similar. Or I mean, you know, they're angular and weird looking. But check out Vektor, Blackfast, and Droid if you know what's good for you. Double episode this week because I had to miss last week. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you around.